Hello and welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr. Today is a very exciting episode, and please don't hang up the phone, but we are talking all about record label royalties and royalty accounting. This is a really big episode, and of course it's part of our Industry Insider series, where occasionally, and I've been doing more of them as per your requests, we talk with someone in the record label industry as opposed to an interview with a record label. These companies in the Industry Insiders episodes are often organizations that do something that support and enable indie record labels, and by golly, today is a good one. Before we get into it, let me tell you that we are actually camping out on the subject of record label royalties over the next few weeks, and there will be lots of helpful things coming your way. I'm going to keep everything I discuss in today's episode and what we do in the future all collected on a single webpage. So go to otherrecordlabels.com/royalties. Royalties is spelled Royalties, I think. Otherrecordlabels.com/royalties. Today I'm talking with Hunter Giles, who is one of the co-founders of a royalty accounting software platform called Infinite Catalog. This is a pretty new company, and I'm telling you, it's pretty revolutionary. It's really simple. It's super straightforward. It's very cool. Let me tell you how this episode came to be. We'll get to the interview, I promise. In the past, when I've surveyed our Facebook community and our listeners, record label royalty accounting in general has consistently been at the top of subjects you all have wanted covered. In fact, it's generally number 2, right behind marketing and PR. So a few months ago, I asked Twitter, who's the voice of reason when it comes to record label accounting? And instantly, a few people pointed me to Infinite Catalog. And I checked them out. This is very exciting. We're going to do a walkthrough of their software on a video later for you to see. And they're giving our listeners a discount. All of that will be kept over at otherrecordlabels.com/royalties. So enjoy the interview and then check out that website. I can't stop thinking about that demo, which is such a weird thing to say because it's like just a software demo, but it was really cool. Like, I was blown away.
I'm so happy to hear that, man. That really means a lot, coming from you especially. Like, I know that you are very interested in this problem. And
absolutely,
I could show this same demo to somebody else, and they'd be like, "Yeah, okay, I don't, whatever."
Cool. Stop talking to me.
Yeah, but when you're in the zone that you're in, that we are in.
Yeah.
That's the goal. We really think we're onto something here, and we're really excited to share with people, and we're so happy to be doing this. This really is like the first interview that I've ever given. So.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Oh, you're doing great. Well, I just think that I don't know. I guess it's accounting, so I expected it to be a lot more boring for one, and maybe even more intimidating as well. Like, it just kind of felt like setting up a Facebook page or something, or you know what I mean? Like, it was like the back end of Bandcamp or something. Well, actually, the back end of Bandcamp is kind of pretty basic. This was even a little bit more like fancier than that. But I don't know. I was really impressed. I think it's really cool.
Cool. Yeah. I think that maybe what you're homing in on is that we didn't build this thinking like, we're trying to simplify it. And we realized that we could do that just by focusing on income and expenses and transfers, which are, advances and payouts and stuff that happen after the split. But when everything is just income or an expense, when it's money in or money out, it actually gets pretty simple. And the incredible complexity of the music industry, that's real. That's not going anywhere anytime soon. And we're not trying to take that on in the way that I think some other places are trying to do. We're just trying to simplify it.
Yeah.
We're just trying to make it easy for anybody to understand. And that also is, a big way that we build the product. Like, we build the platform so that anybody could log in and understand what's going on, whether, you're an in-house accountant at a huge record label, or you're just an artist who, has a feature on one track in somebody's catalog.
Yeah.
We want it to work for everybody. So we've kept simplicity very sort of close at hand whenever we've been making any decisions about how it works.
Okay, so I want to roll right into this. Are you comfortable? Are you good? I have a ton of questions.
Yeah. Oh, are we not already going?
No, we are going. We're absolutely going. The reels have been going. Royalty accounting is really important. In fact, and I mentioned this to you earlier, when I surveyed our community a few months ago, it was in the top 2 topics that they needed help with or that they were interested in, which really surprised me. And it's also, the idea of accounting and royalties is actually where most labels get themselves into trouble. So why is that? Why is it that you think my audience, this community, was so interested in this topic, and it's a place where some people get themselves into trouble?
Yeah, I think there's a really easy answer for that, actually, and that is that traditionally how the process of royalty accounting gets done is very siloed. It's very black box within every specific record label or publisher or whoever's looking after a catalog. Everybody kind of does their own thing with it, and because it's money, you don't really, it's not something that people talk about a lot. And there really isn't a lot of cross pollination between like how my record label does it versus how your record label does it, and there really just isn't a lot of online, there's no like royalty accounting like website that you can go to that I'm aware of. There's just a real dearth of like information and knowledge about it. So it's not surprising that everyone's kind of like, well, I get it. It's 50-50 split, but how do I do it? Like, how does it actually happen?
That's a great point.
And I think that's why it is, because it's a sensitive topic. No one's really sure if they're doing it correctly, and they don't want to do it incorrectly, but they also don't want to raise their hand and say like, I'm having trouble figuring out how much money I owe people. Like, that's a scary thing to raise your hand and sort of volunteer.
And you're right that talking about it with the artist is uncomfortable because you don't want to show them that you don't know what you're doing with their money. And so showing vulnerability or humility in that case is a risky thing for them. But it's also just uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable to have that conversation. I actually, if I were signing an artist now, I would love the opportunity to, in a coffee shop as I'm pitching the label, to open up this software and say, oh, and by the way, this is how I'm dealing with your money.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we built it with the idea that, the artist is going to get access to this. When the label is ready or when the catalog is ready, to share it, it's controlled in that way. We don't want anybody seeing a balance that isn't that isn't finished yet, that isn't complete. Yeah. But once you are ready to share it, the artist has essentially the exact same level of access as the people who run the catalog. I mean, they can only see their own stuff.
Right.
But all of the people that use our platform, like, they all want to be transparent. And it's not a question of will. It's just that it's really hard to be transparent when there's so many different data types that you have to worry about, and you don't it's just hard to share it. It's hard to share it in a way that makes sense and isn't going to raise a bunch of questions and red flags. Like, we want we want people to ask questions, but when you just give them all the information in a way that is understandable, it actually reduces the amount of questions that they have, and you can kind of move beyond this trust issue and get back to putting out great records or writing great songs or whatever.
It's funny you mentioned that, because you're right. Transparency is something I'm always game. I don't care. Look at whatever you want, but it's been tricky because for some platforms, CD Baby, for example, I don't know if they have a great exporting feature. I've just gone in and looked at the platform, but if an artist says to me, I want to see the actual income that comes into CD Baby, the aggregator, I can't let them in there because they're going to see everybody else's, which I think is
Right.
unethical. So, the same thing with Bandcamp, I would just download the spreadsheet and then highlight everybody but them, delete, and then send them that spreadsheet. So it is great to be transparent in a way that they only can view their own stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that you just said exactly what I was trying to say about the different data types. Like the way, and I think that this is another reason why it's become this thing that nobody talks about, but everybody is worried about, and that's because there are so many different we call them data sources these days. Like,
Okay.
20 years ago, you had your distributor, and maybe you had one like foreign distributor, but you didn't have 15 different digital distribution platforms. You didn't have 10 different web stores. You didn't have stuff coming in from all these different places, and now you do. And so the challenge of transparency has only grown.
Yeah. No, that's a good
And
point. Yeah.
yeah,
Before we get too far, I want to address our audience because we're talking about, we're talking to Hunter here from Infinite Catalog, but I want to explain Infinite Catalog because, and I'm going to ask you to, I'm going to ask you about the origin story of about you and label accounting and royalties. But I'm wondering if you could just quickly explain your elevator pitch about what Infinite Catalog is.
sure. So Infinite Catalog is a royalty accounting software and service company. And what we do is we bring in all of your data, or help you bring in all your data from all your different sources, unify it in one platform, and make it really easy for you to create statements and pay the people that you need to pay your collaborators, and share all of the data that went into those statements at the same time.
No,
Yeah.
that's good. And what we're going to do, I've talked to you about this and we'll figure this out after the fact, but I had the opportunity to do a visual walkthrough over Zoom just a couple days ago with you that was incredibly helpful. And I've just been thinking about it in my sleep and throughout the day in which is such a weird thing, but it was really, really cool, really enlightening. And so I want other people to have that experience. And so we're going to do a video. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to basically do another Zoom walkthrough if you're cool with that. And we'll post that up for our audience because there's a lot of visual going on with this platform. So we're going to try to talk about royalties and accounting for record labels as a whole, but we will do that. I want to, maybe you've already answered this when you were talking about, the inaccessible or how opaque this industry has been. But I want to ask you, what's the biggest problem you see labels commit when it comes to label accounting? Where are we most vulnerable?
Ooh, that's a great question. What are the top mistakes that people are making out there, or like the biggest pitfalls to fall into?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, not really understanding how net profit share accounting works.
Okay.
In the first place is like a huge, like the 50-50 deal is great because it is so easy, but it can be difficult to understand how it works without really, I don't know, like doing it in a practical way where you have to understand that like there's a difference between, recoupable expenses that are essentially shared between the catalog and the artist in a 50-50 deal. The catalog puts up the money, but ultimately in net profit accounting, that money is shared between the two parties. Like, yes, the label put it up, but if the thing recoups and the artist eventually is getting paid out, that expense is getting split according to whatever the profit share split is, usually 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different from an advance, which gets paid out or which the artist has to recoup from their 50% share, essentially. And understanding the difference between those things, like sometimes we see or hear people that are they're treating all their expenses like advances, where the artist has to essentially is paying for everything themselves, just on a delay.
Okay.
Or vice versa, seeing somebody put an advance in as an expense, when that's not really what happened. Like, you actually literally gave that person, money out of your pocket. That's very different than a shared expense that you're paying to, like, a third party on behalf of you as a group, as the two of you, the catalog and the artist.
Okay. Let me interrupt you for a second, because I want you to tell me what is appropriate or what is most common based on this question, or based on what you're talking about right now. So if I, as a record label, pay out of my pocket or my credit card's pocket $2,000 to press a vinyl project and for an artist, that $2,000, do I need to pay an artist a royalty before that $2,000 is recouped? Or can I take all of the net sales or gross sales or whatever until that $2,000 is recouped and then start paying a royalty? How does that work?
Yeah, it's the second one. In a net profit share, in a 50-50 kind of deal, the idea is that the label or the catalog or whoever is fronting the money puts up the money, and then they recoup that in full before any additional money is paid out. So it has to basically break even, and then you split any profits according to whatever your deal was. Very often it's 50-50. I'm a huge fan of the 50-50 deal.
Me too.
But it can be anything. It can be 60-40. It could be 60-40 on digital, 50-50 on physical.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of different things that you can do with this net profit mechanism to make it more, appropriate for a specific artist or a specific record or a specific deal. But it gets tricky, and you need a system to, keep track of it, especially if you're putting out a lot of records. Sometimes you pay for stuff where you need to split it up between two records. Like you could like hire a publicist to do two different record releases, but you only paid, you paid them one check, you paid them one lump sum. You have to split that up between the two different records, between the two different deals.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, good point.
So there's just once you have a big enough catalog, there's just a lot of money coming in that needs to go, many different places inside your catalog, and there's a lot of money going out on new records, or repressing old ones, or doing a PR campaign on an existing one. But it gets to be a lot. Like, a cool thing about running a record label, in my opinion, is that you can start small and work your way up. And you can start by just putting out one record, and it's pretty easy to keep track of the expenses and income from one record. You can do that in a spreadsheet, and I strongly encourage anybody starting a record label to do it themselves in a spreadsheet. We're for when that becomes too much, and it doesn't happen overnight. But if you are putting out records consistently, eventually the nag of having to do this every quarter or every 6 months really starts to get overwhelming. And you start to fall behind. And it's not because, you don't want to pay your artists. It's just that it's a real hassle. It's a real big job to bring in all this data from all these different places, make sure you're keeping track of your expenses, splitting it all up correctly, showing it to the artist in a way that they can understand. Like, it's easy at first, and as you grow, it gets to be more challenging. And that's when you need to, very often you need to upgrade your system, whether it's using a software like us, or just having like an in-house accountant who does this all day long. And that is the way that a lot of people, or a lot of catalogs do it. A lot of labels, a lot of publishers have in-house accounting staffs. But in the indie community, none of us have in-house accounting staffs. And we still need to get this job done. And spreadsheets are a great starter tool, but yeah, eventually it just does get to be kind of overwhelming, and it can be really helpful to have, a purpose-built tool and a team behind you. That's another thing, is that we're very we're very like service oriented. We like to say it's software and a service.
Yeah, totally. I think it's also one of those things. It just falls into that category of things that we, as humans, tend to procrastinate with. It just falls into that likely to be procrastinated category. I don't know why that is.
Yeah,
maybe it's more fun
definitely.
to sign bands or to listen to new music. And then it for me, it's like, oh, I need to do that. And the more that I tell myself I need to do this, the more I mentally bury it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just, that's human behavior. And also it's very, it's I don't want to say it's an annoying task, but it is like, it's a chore. It's something that you have to do whether you want to do it or not. If you intend to,
oh, sure.
do right by your artists, do right by your deals. But it doesn't really have to be. It can be turned on its head and become this positive that you're bringing to the table, that you are, you're figuring this out for your artist. Like, sure, the artist, like, self-releasing is easier than ever. So if you're a record label, like, what value are you bringing to this relationship? When it's so easy for an artist to self-release these days. Like, maybe you bankroll some stuff and that's great, but like most record labels I know feel like they do a lot more than just bankroll.
Yeah.
They bring expertise, they bring, muscle, they bring boots on the ground. And doing this job, doing the royalty accounting, is a way that a record label brings a lot of value to an artist, where it's like, you don't have to worry about this. We're going to handle it. And it's not a like, trust us situation. Like, if you're being transparent about it, there's no trust involved. Like, it's all right there.
Yep. That's a great point.
That is something that, I think record labels, like, the ones that really embrace this as something that they bring to the table, that they have gotten good at, or that they, pay for out of their own pocket, since most of the time accounting services are considered label overhead and not a recoupable expense. That is an area that they're bringing value to the artist, and that they can, point to when the artist is deciding whether to re-sign with them for another record or not.
Let me ask you your background and what led you to creating this platform. I have tons of questions about accounting and about the platform specifically, but I'm curious about how, and we didn't really get into this too much when we were talking the other day, about, your origin story in music and with labels, and then for you to kind of abandon all that and say, now I want to make accounting software.
Well, I haven't abandoned it. I still run a label.
Good.
I don't put out as many records these days, but I do still manage a label and some bands. But these days it is, very much mostly Infinite Catalog. But having that real experience is the backstory. I mean, I worked at a label called Bada Bing, which is a great label in Brooklyn. And I got hired there right when I had started my own little label, just, myself. And they let me run my label on the side while I worked there. And when I was there, the royalty accounting task sort of fell to me. And so I kind of dug in and learned how it worked, and, started building some spreadsheet templates, and then adapted those templates to my label and my, slightly different situation. And just doing that jump, moving from like taking one label system and moving it to another, was a real eye opener, because it just made me like, it took me out of the silo that we were talking about earlier, where like everybody has their own unique way of doing it. And when you try to adapt a system from one label to another, you learn a lot about how the system needs to work if it's going to, be able to handle more than just one specific label, one specific catalog. And from there, I took a very quick detour where I thought I was going to be a music lawyer, because I was so interested in like contracts and how the money flows and the stuff that, I was already kind of doing. But I decided, I left law school after one day, and instead, I got there, and it was basically like, I realized I had to choose between this and music. And music industry, and I decided to just try
Like
to
one
figure it out
day,
in the
like
music
one day, like
industry.
just what isn't the first day just
I
all
bought
the
my
fun
books in the
stuff?
morning.
The,
I bought my books in the morning,
you
and
bought your
I
books
sold them back in the afternoon.
for
That's what
20%
happened.
of what you paid for them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I didn't, but yeah, I didn't actually. It didn't cost me anything, luckily, because I had a scholarship. Um, but right after that, I was just talking to a friend and talking. I was asked who runs a record label, and asked him how he was doing his royalty accounting, because I think I was doing my own label at the time. I was doing my royalties, and it's like, how do you do this? And he was like, "Ooh, yeah, not not that well, basically. Like,
Yeah.
why? Do you know how to do this? Like, can I pay you to do this for me? Like, I would love to just not do this and have somebody else do it for me." And that was kind of the spark that was like, oh, okay. Like, I know a lot of people who run record labels. I've been doing, this in New York for 5 years at this point, maybe, or not even, like 3 or 4. But I already knew a lot of people who had started labels, and the word just kind of got around that I was this royalty spreadsheet guy, and I charged people by the hour because some people's labels take a lot longer than others, and it was just, I was using spreadsheets, so the only cost
that's a good
was my
idea.
time. And slowly but surely, that business, that like side of what I was doing, started to pick up steam, and take up more of my time, and it was like a much more stable income, frankly. Like, you're doing it every quarter or every 6 months for the same people, and they're always very happy. I was always so pleased with how happy they would be when I would like hand them their stack of digital statements, like, here's your 30 statements.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh my god, this is, they were just so happy with the work that was very encouraging to me. But eventually it got to be where I was like, you know what, though? I'm doing so much of this is just like manual, frankly, a lot of copy and pasting of like thousands and thousands of rows, and a lot of like, Excel formulas. And the spreadsheets were getting better and better and more automated, and using macros and, pretty intense formulas. I got pretty deep into Excel for a few years there. But I just I knew enough about databases and software that like, this really needs to be software. So I started looking around. I was like, this must exist. This has to exist. Like, I just really haven't, I must not have found it yet. And I looked around, and there really just wasn't very much. It seemed like all of the existing solutions were built for, major labels or like giant indies. And they cost, thousands of dollars a month, and they are these very expensive, very like, frankly, like very antiquated software.
Right, with probably with a lot of redundant things that wouldn't apply to smaller labels, right?
Yeah, and that was the other thing. They were all built for what are commonly known as like PPD deals, or royalty-based deals, which are the very old school type of record contracts that are kind of dying. I mean, major labels definitely still use them, as do some larger indies, but the 50/50 deal really took hold in the independent community in, I think, like the late 80s and 90s, and there really wasn't a software that I found that was good enough to like bring all of my business to, bring all my customers onto, and like maybe I would just do the service aspect of it for them or something. It just didn't exist. So I kind of, I thought about it, and I asked around a little about, programmers or coders that I knew, but no one really seemed like a good fit. And I just really did not want to like start a software company, frankly. Like, I didn't want to be in the tech space. Sure. I didn't want to talk to VCs. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. And it just seemed like that was that was what it was going to take. So I kind of put it on ice, but it kept growing. And then I eventually kind of like, I convinced my now co-founder, I finally convinced him that there was like a real opportunity here, and we started building it in late 2018.
Oh, wow. I
And
didn't realize it was that new. That's crazy.
yeah. I mean, well, like I said, I mean, I've been doing it, professionally in quotes where, somebody's paying me for it. I don't
Sure.
know if that makes me a professional or not, but, um, uh, but yeah, I've been doing it for like a decade at this point, but the software itself really only, started its little baby steps, like late 2018, and we decided to spin it off as its own separate company called Infinite Catalog. And the first year was really building like the prototype and like making sure it worked, and the numbers added up, and doing it literally just like for my little label, making sure it works for that first, and
Yeah.
then we got it to a pretty good place. And I had all these customers already, right? I had all these catalogs that I
Oh,
was
yes.
still doing it in spreadsheets. And then, so year two was like me, me doing it simultaneously in spreadsheets and in the software to make sure that it worked.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And yeah, but it's awesome now. It wasn't awesome at the time. It was really, really hard and frustrating to basically be doing double work.
Yeah.
And like, oh man. But it got so good so fast because we rolled in my existing customer base like one at a time, and got feedback and made sure it worked for them. And that really helped the product grow in a great way, just sort of organically, like from real users. We weren't like guessing about what people would want or what they needed or how it needed to work. Like we knew, like we've been doing it, and we had customers who who were starting to use the platform and sort of prove the case.
And when you
so
talk
now we're only just now opening the doors to new customers, which has
That's
been very
incredible.
exciting.
When you talk about labels, the size of our listeners, which would be medium size labels and right down to very small and newly starting labels, what were they doing before 2018, before you came along? And if they weren't hiring you, was it they were doing spreadsheets? Were any of these medium sized labels using these big enterprise solutions? Was there like a QuickBooks style software that could just be molded to whatever industry you used it for? Like, what were people using 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, so people were and continue to, the new customers that are coming on board now, we always ask them, what have you been doing?
Mm-hmm.
And in the medium size, to small label world, most people are either using spreadsheets or they're using QuickBooks.
Right.
And you can do royalty accounting in spreadsheets and you can do it in QuickBooks, but it eventually becomes a giant headache and hassle because they're just not built for that. They're not built to do royalty accounting, which is it's kind of its own weird discipline, like that I didn't even really understand at first. That it was so separate from like bookkeeping and like double entry accounting and like all this like hundreds of year old like accounting principles and practices. I mean, net profit share is certainly not new. It's literally just sharing, but applying the principles of net profit share to essentially like big data problems. Like, I've got 10 million streams and half of them need to go over here and half of them need to go over there. And then you need to split them up in these different ways. Like that is the new challenge. And QuickBooks isn't built for that for sure. QuickBooks is an amazing tool for small business accounting or just, bookkeeping. And royalty accounting overlaps with bookkeeping a little bit, mostly in the expenses zone. But when you get a big data file and a check that's like, the total, but you need to parse the data file to figure out how much of the check to, apply to which account or apply to which artist. QuickBooks is not your friend.
No, I would not want to do it that way.
Yeah. So most people are doing spreadsheets and QuickBooks, but then they quickly, it quickly gets overwhelming.
I think the biggest issue is even no matter what format you're doing, and tell me how you've addressed this, is downloading and ingesting monthly or quarterly data into your label accounting system, whether it's your software or it's our own Google Sheets or whatever, from all these various sources of income that we've been talking about. How did you handle that?
Sorry, you cut out a little bit, but I think the question was, how do you handle all the different kinds of royalties?
Yeah, like all of the source.
Data,
that's
format?
right. The sources of income. How have you tackled that? Because there's all sorts of different monies that come in, not just from traditional retail. Now it comes in all over the place.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why it's gotten harder in the last 10 years or so. I would say. Rather than easier, is because there are new data sources that you want to be a part of. You want to be making money on Sound Exchange or getting your rights income from Sound Exchange, or like neighboring rights, or making sure that you're on all of the digital platforms and not just the big guys. Like,
sure.
Getting all of that data from all those different sources, whether it's Bandcamp, AWOL, DistroKid, Sound Exchange, whatever. Like, the way that I did it in spreadsheets was building out custom templates for each catalog, where it's like, okay, this is your catalog has these 6 data sources. So every statement has these 6 tabs with all of that data for that relevant, for that artist or that record. Whatever you're trying to build the statement for, all that data goes into those deep tabs, and then you build summaries that read that data and funnel it to a statement format on the front page, where you can just look at the statement, the front page of the Excel doc, the statement, and be like, okay, cool, that's the summary. But if you want to go deeper, there are deeper tabs that have all of the data available to you. And that is actually how we kind of realized that transparency wasn't going to be like a problem for our customers or for our future customers. Like, some people were a little bit skeptical that we were telling, when we would tell people what we were building, they were like, well, are they really going to want to share all that data? Like, are they really going to want to, make that available to the artists? Like, don't record labels like to steal money from artists? Isn't that what they're doing over there all the time? And it's like, no, people are literally paying us money to help them figure this out. Like, there's no
True.
Nobody's like doing this in a nefarious way. It's literally just, it's a chore. It's a problem. It's hard to do. It's a challenge. And the way that we do it, so doing it in spreadsheets like that, it's possible, but it's very fragile. If they add a new data source, or the formatting changes one month to the next, which does happen. Suddenly your template's broken and you got to fix the template, and then you got to fix it for everybody else, and it just becomes whack-a-mole, essentially.
Yeah.
And with Infinite Catalog, it's a lot better, because we just build importers for every kind of data. And if a data source, like if TuneCore changed their formatting of the data that they give you, we're going to be like the first people to notice, because someone's going to try to ingest the TuneCore file, and it's not going to work. And we're going to look at it, and we're going to be like, what changed? And we're going to see what changed. And then we're going to tweak the importer so that it works again. And that first guy who stumbled onto this problem, he'll have to maybe wait a day for us to fix the importer, tweak the importer. But everybody else isn't even going to notice. Everybody else in an Infinite Catalog is just going to, say, oh, well, the TuneCore importer didn't miss a beat. Like, they changed their format,
but awesome.
It continued to work. And we can even make improvements where it won't even break in the first place. But point is, with a platform like ours, when something changes for one catalog, everybody else benefits. And that goes for us too. Like, when we learn about oh, how do you handle this weird situation? and somebody's got a really good answer that we've never heard before, we're like, that's a great answer. That's a great way to handle that problem. If some other label asks us, like, how do I handle that same problem? We will, we apply that to them. We're like, here's how, we saw this other label do it this way, and we thought it was really smart. So that's what we're going to recommend to you. And it really does benefit everybody.
So you built these importers for every single income source that a label might encounter.
Correct. I mean, we build several a week at this point. We basically build them on demand as our customers, like as we're adding new customers, and they've got new data sources that we've never seen before.
Right.
We build them, the importers for them, like, and sometimes with them, to be like, this is how we think it. This is how we interpret this data. Is this how you like? Do you agree? Is this correct? Do you?
Yeah, because I mean, it's possible. We talk about this on the show about alternative income streams and multiple income streams for labels, and it's very likely that a label could have an Etsy store, and they could sell prints of something or whatnot. And so, I mean, that's just not. It's not crazy to think that there are so many different possible income streams out there aside from just Bandcamp, CD Baby, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're just talking about merch, and that's that's such a that's kind of like what it makes me think of what we were talking about at the very beginning about simplicity, and how in our system we don't really distinguish between master side income or rights income or publishing income or merch income. Like, it's all just income, and it works no matter where it's coming from. And the way that you treat that income might be different inside the system, where, if it's master side, you might pay out 50%. And if it's publishing, maybe you pay out 90% or something. But just the idea that all income is income, and you as a record label can, it doesn't have to just be music. Like, it can also be t-shirts. It can also be posters. It can also be whatever else you want to sell. If you want to do that, like, as part of your record deals with your artists, like, you should be able to do that, and you should be able to keep track of the accounting just in the same way. And that's what net profit share really gives you. Whether it's our platform or another platform, like, net profit share is just this magical concept that the music industry, or the independent music industry, I should say, has really like latched onto, and it really opens up this world of possibility that can happen when you're just treating everything like income and expenses.
Can you, we talked about this a lot. Can you talk to me about royalty splits? Like, what is and this is a big question for very, very new labels. What is the most common based on what you've seen? Is it 50-50?
Oh yeah, by a country mile. I mean, the 50-50 deal, I don't know who invented it. I know that it's definitely, very featured in the like history of the independent record label. Yeah. But it is in my opinion like the most magical deal. And I'm a big fan of it. Like, not even just in music or like putting out records, but just like in the world. Like, when it's 51-49 in either direction, like, the relationship is just so much different.
Right. Yeah, totally.
50-50 is like the true partnership. And
it's beautiful.
And that is, it's also very like, it does feel fair. Like, the reality is, even in indie music, like, most records never recoup. Most records never break even.
Sure.
Most records, the label loses money. That is just how it goes.
Yeah.
Or that's been my experience anyway. That's, thousands of statements that I've, had a hand in, and that is the reality. But so the label is taking on risk, and, many times will not make it back. When they do make it back, at least it's shared evenly, and presumably, the label participated in the success in some way, making it happen, or even just putting up that initial funding. And the fact is also that in indie music, like, it's not like people really sign like 4 record deals that really lock someone in. It's much more common to see, 1, 2, 3 record deals at most. And so even if something does really like go like pop off and it had nothing to do with the label and the label just kind of like, quote, got lucky, like
Right.
the artist is still free to move on. And, the label still took that chance. Like the artist, everybody agreed that it was the right deal at the time. And the fact that it was a success, doesn't mean it was a bad decision. It means it was a good decision. And that's very, very different from major label royalty style deals where literally you're never happy no matter what happens.
Yeah,
Either it's a failure,
yeah,
which is most of them, or it's a huge success and you cannot believe that the label keeps, 85% of your royalties, which is what happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Going back to the ingestion process and the money that comes in from other sources of income and all those different properties out there, how do you focus on the net? How do you boil it down to what the label actually receives? Because, I mean, you open up the Bandcamp spreadsheet and there's the gross, but then there's also shipping is involved in there. And I mean, even as something small as the PayPal fee, if you forget to take that off, I mean, how does that, I find that's like a big thing that labels often forget to consider is paying a royalty off of the actual net receipts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is an art to understanding these data files from all these different sources and how they, what wording they use and what, where the columns are positioned and all that stuff. And we've gotten pretty good at it, but the short answer is, at least for our system, or really like what I would recommend for anybody, even if you're doing it in spreadsheets or not, is we're always looking for the number that hit your bank account.
Right. Okay.
And with a few exceptions, but typically, and this is how it works in Infinite Catalog, but this is for anybody. But like when you say income in a net profit share arrangement, you just mean what you got. It doesn't mean gross minus the distribution cost minus processing fees or whatever. Like it does mean all that, but you can just boil that down to just like, okay, well, what did I get? What did I get
That's
paid?
Right.
I sold it on Bandcamp for $20, and there's all these fees. Not that many fees. Like Bandcamp's great, but But where is the income? Like, where is the real number? And that is always what we're kind of questing for in this data is like, how do we, like, sometimes it's really easy and Bandcamp does make it easy. Then the net amount column, that's the one in Bandcamp.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure off the top of my head. But they do have lots of other stuff. And the place where it gets tricky, I will, to your point, is always when it comes to web store stuff. And in particular, okay, well, I collected the shipping income. Is that income?
Yes. Yeah.
Does that, does that also count? And the answer is it depends.
Okay.
The way that we recommend folks do it, I mean, it's literally in our, knowledge base, which is public and anyone can go and read. But like the way that I do it, the way that we recommend doing it, I'm not saying it's the right way. I do think it's the best way over, a decade of doing it. But the way that I typically recommend doing it is you should charge for shipping. You shouldn't be like, no, let's just include it in the price. That muddles the picture.
Yeah, totally.
And it's, every web store on the planet has an option to like charge for shipping specifically. And I always recommend you use it. And the shipping should just be, whatever the cost is to get that record out the door. So your packaging and your labor and the postage. And that should come to those costs, your fulfillment costs, as we call them. I always recommend that they come close to what the actual shipping charge is. So maybe like you sell a vinyl for $20 and the shipping is $5 because the media mail shipping is like, $3 and the mailer is, 50 cents and the tape and stuff is another 50 cents. Like you get to like $4.50,
Sure.
charge $5. That way you're covered if like somebody's gets bounced back or gets lost in the mail, and you want to just send them another one without having to like recharge the shipping. Basically I just recommend that the shipping be treated separately, where it just takes care of itself. Like, yes, you brought in that shipping income, but you also covered the expenses associated with it. And if you keep it separate, you don't have to keep track of all of that. Like, you really don't.
No, right.
It's not your business. Did you make an extra 25 cents on the shipping, quote unquote, because, you charged $5 and it actually cost you $4.75. It's like, okay, well, maybe that quarter is, just a future postage for somebody who's got lost in the mail.
Well, that's
or
it.
Maybe it's a quarter.
I've always,
for your labor.
Yeah. And I've always, the way I've had it, because in Canada, shipping is much worse than it is in the States. And I would always, lose a ton of money on shipping a record to Europe, but I would maybe make almost $1 if I was shipping a CD locally. You know what I mean? But I knew, okay, this local person is actually paying so that somebody in Europe can get the record for a reasonable shipping cost.
Yeah, and like, to me, that is a separate thing from like what you're trying to really do and what your agreement was with the artist, which is selling the record and splitting the profits. Like, the shipping stuff, you can totally track it down to the penny if you wanted to. And, if you did make an extra quarter because it was a low shipping charge, or you recycled a vinyl mailer instead of buying, using one that you bought, like whatever it is, like you can work that into the accounting and
so are you
sure
suggesting
that the artist gets their 50%? But
this is the way I've done it.
You don't have to, in my opinion.
The way I've done it, and I think this is what you're saying, is that the shipping has nothing to do with the artist, that I take the shipping money, 100% of it, and then as a label, all of our shipping is just our overhead. Is that right? Or even in a way, you don't even have to take the shipping as income. We just try to cancel it out. But you don't involve it on the artist statement in any way?
That's exactly right.
Okay, I totally agree. I think
that's how we recommend. You can do it. We do have some fastidious catalogs who they don't want to profit an extra penny, and I totally respect that.
That's true. Yeah. Okay.
But it really, to me, it's not worth it if it's going to distract you from sending out more emails to music writers, or figuring out a better PR campaign or something. Like, those to me are better uses of a record label's time and energy.
That's
it's
helpful.
Different for everybody.
When we talked about royalty splits, and I think you mentioned this at the beginning, but I want to hear you say it again. I've talked to some labels who have a really robust physical distribution system, or maybe they're just really well known in the vinyl community or in the tape community, but perhaps they lack experience in streaming and playlisting, and therefore they might do 50-50 split on physical, but only an 80-20 in favor of the artist on digital, or vice versa, maybe. What are your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on that are that is awesome, and I wish more labels would do stuff like that. Like, in other words, tailor the arrangement to be a better fit for everybody's strengths. Like, maybe an artist has been just killing it on digital by themselves, and they just want the label for, the manufacturing and distribution of physical product expertise and to front the money or something. Mm-hmm. But they would rather keep their digital or keep a bigger percentage of it. And that is exactly the kind of deal that I would recommend, is like okay, we'll do a 50-50 on the physical, and then maybe like a 75-25 on the digital, where the artist gets 75 or something.
Sure.
But the problem with that is that you just made your accounting challenge a lot bigger.
Sure.
because now you've got expenses that need to either go to the physical or the digital, or maybe you split them in some way between the two. Like if it's PR, like which side is that really publicizing? Well, it's doing both. Like
Sure.
you kind of want it to affect both places. And then, treating the digital income transactions on a 75% split versus the physical income transactions on a 50% split. Like it's a challenge, and I wouldn't recommend doing it in spreadsheets. Like literally save yourself the trouble, do a 50-50 deal. But that is also, and I'm not trying to like pimp my thing, but
it's okay. You can hear.
But like, well, that's like it was an unintended bonus that we realized we had like stumbled into, which is that with a database system like ours, it's actually really easy to do that. It's one of those things that, like, I love spreadsheets and, encourage as many people to do royalties and spreadsheets for as long as they can until they can't stand it anymore, or until they want to do more specialized deals like what we're talking about. But at that point, you need a better solution to save yourself the nightmare of accounting that's going to create. And that's happening whether you want it to or not. Like Bandcamp Day is a great example of, like, we had a lot of catalogs asking us, like, how do I pass through Bandcamp Day income to my artists? 100%.
Yeah.
I just want to pass through just that income from just that source on just that day.
Oh my gosh.
That can be a challenge. It can be pretty easy. It depends on your setup and depends on a lot of different factors. But like when we first got approached with that challenge, we were like, oh my God, we're perfect for this. Like this is amazing. We can, the way our system works, and you saw a little bit yesterday, and hopefully we'll do like a video thing.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure this isn't like the most compelling conversation without seeing it. Over here talking about spreadsheets for an hour, but yeah, that's the kind of stuff that that is a much bigger lift in spreadsheets versus just doing a straight 50-50, which is like, again, a magical thing, and you can do it in a spreadsheet. And I definitely recommend everyone start there. But if you're trying to grow and, offer better deals that make more sense for both parties, you're going to want a more tailored solution to help you do that. And not like, paint yourself into this corner.
I mean, you didn't walk me through that process, but I just looking at how, click this, move this over here, drag this, how I could go into that software after only seeing it for an hour 2 days ago. I feel like I could figure that out really quickly. It seems like it's really flexible in that way. And it's so funny you brought up the Bandcamp Day, because I saw, the every Friday during the pandemic, when the not every Friday, one Friday a month, and Bandcamp said that we're going to waive their 9% or 10% fee to give everything to the artists on that particular day. And then, of course, labels following suit and saying, we're going to waive our royalties on that day and give, essentially they get 100%, minus probably PayPal, but 100% from the fan straight to the artist. And it was funny when I saw labels tweet that out, before I was aware of your platform, I was like, how are you doing that? That sounds like an absolute nightmare. I would rather, if my artist asked for that, I would just say, here's $50. Like, here's just $100. I don't know what it is, but I'd rather just give you a gift card than to have to figure that out.
I mean, I don't want to make it seem like it's this impossible challenge. Your your concerns notwithstanding, like, it's super possible. Like, you can go into Bandcamp, you download the CSV, you do a pivot table, you figure out some totals, you pay out some money, you move on, and you just like delete that data from your normal Bandcamp data in your normal statement. Like, it's super possible. I don't want to make it seem like it's something
no,
you can't do
I agree. Yes,
software.
I agree.
But if you don't want it to be this like thing that happened off to the side that you solved the problem, but then it faded in the background. And if anybody ever looked at, a royalty statement, they'd be like, why is Bandcamp missing an entire day?
Right.
You have to remember, like
Yeah.
it's probably never going to come up, but wouldn't it be nice to just actually have everything in one place? Like actually just, you still see those transactions in the system, but those are being passed through at 100% instead of split 50-50.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be this like offsite separate thing. It's just,
Are there
that happened.
Are there other cases like that you've encountered, like a Bandcamp Friday, or somebody saying, hey, we want to siphon off monies for a charitable organization or something like that?
Every single day.
Really?
Because
wow.
that's the other thing that we learned very quickly, even with the software. I mean, I kind of knew this in the back of my head from having done it in spreadsheets for so many different labels over the years, but like the software is great, but the best software in the world is useless if you don't know how to use it right and understand how it applies to the ever-changing landscape that is the music industry.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why we're very big on like software and a service, because I literally can't say that there has been a label or a publisher or a, management company that has signed up for our thing and not had a like, hey, so great, it's working great for, all the bulk of everything, but I've got this one weird thing where like I, told this artist that we could do this featured split where the featured artist gets 5%, but only up to 1,000, and then it reverts back to the artist.
Wow, true,
and like,
true.
how does that? Can we do that? And and the answer is always yes, because it's just income and expenses and splits. Like, there's nothing we can't do. But it's tricky. Like it's tricky, and you don't want to be guessing because it's money. It's people's money you're talking about.
Yeah.
And having having like experts behind you who you can always, raise your hand in a private way and say like, hey, team at Infinite catalog services team, hey, like, I actually don't really know how to make this deal happen in the software. Can you help me out with this? And then we do, and then it's in most cases it's a set it and forget it. Like, cool, we just set it up, and then that it's automated so that it works that way moving forward, or until it needs to not work that way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But that's such a big part of what we do is the service aspect, and it doesn't stop. It's not it's not like, oh cool, you're set up and here are the keys and like we'll never talk to you again because we're Excel or we're Gmail or something. It's not that. Like it's a constantly changing landscape that it's
not like they get a CD-ROM in the mail that they have to install.
It's just and we're just we're just such like, or at least I am, like, just nerds for this. Like, this is all we think about all day is like, oh, that's a cool deal. Like, yeah, I see why you made that deal. Let's make it real. Let's make it a reality in the numbers. Let's like help you keep your word on, what was a good idea, and it's just hard to pull off because accounting is tricky.
What's the norm for when it comes to labels charging artists for their services, their label services, as opposed to keeping it separate as overhead? Because we get this question a lot from new labels in our community. If they are, maybe they're a record label that has a recording studio and they want to charge a fee in that regard, or even if it's just, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there might be graphic design services or certain services. What is there a norm, or what are your thoughts and opinions on that?
There definitely isn't a norm that I've seen.
Okay.
But I will say that it's interesting to frame it that way, like like labels offering label services separate from their label activities. I haven't quite heard it phrased that way. Mostly what we see are management companies that are getting into the label game, even if it's just helping their artists, take back control of their masters that were licensed to an indie label for 10-year on a 10-year deal, and that deal is up. So they want to, take it back and just self-release it on TuneCore, but they still have to pay the producer every quarter or something. That's more of what we're seeing is, record management companies, self-release artists, publishers getting into the label game themselves and having to figure out how it needs to work for them.
Yeah.
Where maybe instead of a 50-50 deal, it's just their normal management cut. Maybe it's a 15%, on the net or something, or on the gross, or whatever the deal is. But as far as like charging for other stuff, I do want to answer your question more directly. Recording studio time or graphic design that goes outside the bounds of like artwork for a release. I mean, I don't know. I would say that if it's truly like a separate thing, then like it should just be a separate thing. It should just be, this is what we charge for the studio time.
Sure.
And you can, it's an option, or maybe we'll give you a discount because you're right, a homie, but
yeah, no, and I'm not suggesting.
Much more. It's the other direction. It's other. Yeah.
I'm not suggesting. Yeah. I don't like the idea of a label nickel and diming for things that because obviously they're getting paid from their cut, so they shouldn't really necessarily charge on top of that. But I know the question comes up quite a bit. Now I can imagine if you hired a specific photographer or graphic designer for an album campaign, then that could be seen more as an album expense. But I just know that topics sometimes comes up as what do we consider to be a recoupable expense versus what the label should just be providing as a way to earn their 50%.
Oh yeah, I mean that. Okay, when phrased in that way, like that is something we deal with all the time.
Okay,
yeah,
I wasn't clear.
No. Just like what is a recoupable expense is a great question. Sometimes it's super obvious, like pressing a record, and sometimes it's a lot less obvious. And ideally, it's spelled out in the contract where it says, these things are recoupable, these things are not. And in most indie contracts that I've seen that, are more than a napkin, it does say something to that effect. But it's also, I would also say that it should be more of a conversation than it is between the catalog and the artist. And I think that the reason it's not is because there's a misunderstanding about how all this works, how net profit deals work, how even if the label is putting up the money in a 50-50 deal, the artist is actually paying for half of it if it does recoup, right? So when viewed through that lens, it can be a bigger conversation where, the label can say like, hey, we would love to pay for this. Are you okay with us spending this money? Maybe they're not. Maybe the artist is like, nah, man, like, I think that's a bad use of what could be my money.
Yeah.
So maybe don't do that. Totally. Or, if you think it's such a good idea, like it should be an overhead expense for you, but I don't want it to be a recoupable expense. Thanks anyway.
Yeah.
It can be more of a conversation than it is, but I think that just a lot of people don't realize exactly how it works, and it's a little bit, they don't know what it's quote unquote like supposed to be. Totally. The short answer is just that like if it's directly related to the manufacturing or publicizing of a release, it should probably be a recoupable expense. If it's not, it depends. If it's, studio time is a great example, or mastering, actually. Mastering is definitely the best example of who's responsible for this cost. Because on an indie deal, if it's a license where the label only has the rights to it for 5 years or 10 years or maybe 15 or 20 at most, at the end of that deal, the rights revert back to the artist.
The album's still mastered.
Ride away in the sunset.
Yeah.
But the album is still mastered, right? Exactly.
Oh, good point. I never thought of that. Yeah,
they're old. Yeah, the photos have dated. Yeah. The PR campaign has long since stopped.
Good point.
Being an expense item. but the masters live on. So who pays for that? That is always a great question. It's honestly like I can't. It totally depends. It goes. I would say it's literally like half the time it's a recoupable expense, half the time it's considered an advance. Whereas like studio time, like the making of the record, mixing, that stuff generally is considered an advance or the artist's responsibility, because that will live on after the label deal has expired.
Right.
So that's how we advise people to think about it. But it's really up to you and you and your artist, and it should be outlined in the deal. But even if it's not, it can be a conversation.
We've touched on so many things. I have a few more questions. There's a few more topics I'm really curious about. And I think our audience is going to be okay with a longer than normal episode, just because this is such a important topic and a topic of interest. Can you briefly touch on publishing? Even if a label isn't handling the artist's publishing, are there responsibilities a label has when it comes to mechanicals or any other royalties that they need to be aware of that your platform helps out with?
Well, yeah, you nailed it with mechanicals. That is the link between label and publisher from a financial standpoint, or master rights holder versus and songwriter. That is the link between them. Mechanicals are, in my opinion, a positive thing for artists and songwriters specifically. There is definitely a precedent in the United States, at least. I think it's a little bit different abroad, but of indie deals having artists waive their right to mechanicals.
Yes.
And should I explain what mechanicals are?
Yeah, go ahead. Really go ahead.
Right. So mechanicals are what's called I forget. Oh man, I'm already blanking. But it's it's a statutory right, or it's a right that if I'm making a copy of something, I owe whoever created the original version some money, basically. So anytime you press records or make CDs or sell a download, there is often a mechanical obligation, which is just, usually it's 9.1 cents per track, that the record label, if you manufacture one record with 10 songs on it and you just make a single copy, that's 91 cents that you should pay the publisher or the artist if they are self-published. And that's whether you sell the record or not. And it's basically a way of making sure that the songwriters are compensated, regardless of whether the record label, does a good job or not.
Right.
If they press 1 million records and they only sell 10 of them, that's their problem. They owe the mechanicals to the songwriter or the publisher, regardless. In America, there has been this precedent of indie labels saying we don't really do that. It's a burden on us. You're an indie artist and you probably don't even have a publisher. So it's just us taking money out of your pocket over here and giving it into a different pocket over there. And let's just call it a wash.
But where does it come from? Is it an expense for the label?
Right. So yes, exactly. And who pays for the expense is another, open question. Whether it's considered a shared expense, like any recoupable expense would be, or whether it's considered an advance, where it's actually out of the artist's pocket, out of the master artist's pocket. Honestly, it goes either way. It really, we see probably a pretty even split between those two options, but it is something that the label pays out of pocket in one way or the other, whether they get recouped half of it because it's a shared expense, or they get recouped all of it because it's an advance. That's up to them, but it really should be. It should happen, and it's mostly been about this is a really annoying accounting thing.
Yes,
and if it's me taking 9.1 cents out of your master side statement and adding 9.1 cents to your publishing statement, Like, why just, can I just not do that? Can I just save us all the trouble?
Yeah. And
which is honestly, it's a legitimate
for
thing
sure. For sure.
In certain cases. But
I think you alluded to it. It may not be legal across the globe. I'm not 100% sure that you'd get away with it in the UK.
I think you can't. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think that's a difference internationally. Is you're not allowed to waive that right in a label deal in other countries.
You know what? Another funny thing that's not relevant anymore, but in Canada, we passed a law where the manufacturers of blank CDs, like those big spindles of 50, had to pay. I think it was they had to basically pay a mechanical fee to the Canadian music industry or our PRO or something, assuming that those CDs.
SOCAN? Yeah,
it could have been. It may have been to another.
That's interesting.
But
That's really
assuming
clever.
that those CDRs were going to be used for piracy.
Right. Where it's like, listen, we all know where these things are going. Yeah. So if you want to sell them, you're going to have to compensate the people who you're, accidentally stealing from, or helping aid and abet the theft of their intellectual property. That's really clever.
So what? Sorry, did you want to add anything more to that?
Well, I was just going to say that's similar to the running theme of this, which is that spreadsheets work for a while, but then it can become a hassle, it can become a headache, or there can be situations that they're just not great for. And mechanicals is a good one. Where, in a software, you can make it so that every download triggers a separate transaction that is a mechanical that gets paid to this publisher, it gets paid to that songwriter. And it kind of happens automatically in the background. You set it up, and then you don't have to think about it anymore. So that you don't have to ask an artist to waive this right because it's an annoying headache.
Yeah.
You can say, no, we're a real deal label. Of course we pay mechanicals. Happy to do it. It's no problem for us. It's it's an advance out of your pocket anyway. So
sure.
It's just, that's fine. But at least you're not asking a favor because you aren't really, you're not that interested in the problem or something.
Right.
Yeah. It should be something that you do. And I get that it's a huge challenge, and I don't begrudge anyone who waives it and wants to do it in spreadsheets, but it can be done pretty easily in software.
What kind of transparency does your platform offer the artist?
Full and total.
Okay.
and just to double down on that. So I think I said earlier, it's controlled, where everything that gets added to your catalog in IC, all the transactions are unpublished by default. We don't want you to, add in, a record sale for $20, like we were talking about on the demo. Somebody, knocked on your door, asked to buy a record, you sold it for $20 cash. You put the transaction in Infinite Catalog, and then the artist knocks on your door and says, "Hey, can I get that $10 that you owe me now?"
Yeah.
We don't want to put you in that spot. And, maybe you don't owe them that $10 because you paid an expense earlier that morning.
Sure.
And you forgot to enter that one. Everything's unpublished by default to not make you put you in an awkward spot. But once you publish it to the artist, which happens through the generating of the statement, when you generate the statement, it publishes the transactions associated with that statement. And the artist gets access to the platform where they can log in, see the statement, click through where there's, a line that says, here's $1,000 in income. You can click the hyperlink, and it'll jump you right to that, the 10,000 streams that led to that income number.
Yeah.
So there's that level of transparency where you're making it really easy for them, because they don't have to look at, the Spotify streams in this format and the Bandcamp downloads in that format and try to figure it out for themselves. You've given them access to a unified platform where they can see all of the transactions in the same format, and they can use the reports tools and filters to analyze and slice and dice that
and
data
make some pretty infographics too, right?
make some pretty cool graphs.
Yeah.
Love a good graph, but also export the transactions to, if you want to mess around with it in Excel or put it in Tableau or put it in some other platform, like you can totally do that. But even further than that, in the transactions that you can export in Infinite Catalog, there is a cell at the very end of every row, which is a compressed version of the raw data itself from which that transaction was built. So in other words, it looks like Bandcamp and your direct Spotify deal, those transactions look the same in Infinite Catalog, which is what you want. But then if you wanted to see how Bandcamp actually delivered that data versus how Spotify delivered that data, and maybe there's some more info in that, in the raw data that, we don't use, like info about, who bought this, which Bandcamp gives you. And of course, Spotify does not. But maybe you want to do something with that. You have it. It's literally there.
Very cool.
There's nobody who uses our platform with the intention of obfuscating what's going on.
Yeah.
If you're using our platform, you're there to be transparent and get this job done and go do something else. Like go put out more records, go make more music. Like we're not, if we're doing our job, you're not really thinking about us very much. You're certainly happy when the statements are on time and when, they're accurate.
It's so funny to think of what it would have been like if you had been hired in the 1970s to build this software for the record labels back then. You would have had to have a whole section for drugs, and you would have had to have like a way for them to go in the back end and pull out some money.
I believe you're referring to the champagne and flowers budget.
That's right.
Which is what I understand they used to put all the drugs under, which you could still do,
That's true. Everything is an income and expense, according to you.
That's right. It can just be an expense.
Talk to me about the importance of giving, and this is what you're touching on, about giving yourself or the artist a view of your financials from 30,000 feet, from the impact of seeing it all laid out clearly and neatly. I mean, we talked about this the other day, and this has been my takeaway from when I was looking at the software. But I think humans are so prone to overestimate our accomplishments on days when we're feeling good, and we underestimate our situations on bad days. And I feel like something like this, seeing all of the data put together properly, takes out that human emotions, those human elements, and just shows us how we're doing.
Yeah. I think it has a huge effect on how people feel about what they're doing when they're running a record label. The ability to see the 30,000 foot view. And I know because we show it to people for the first time, and I swear to God, sometimes it's like, those videos where, and I don't want to overstate what I'm doing here. This is going to sound very grandiose, but sometimes there is this moment of like, it's like when the child gets like glasses for the first time. And, or
those guys who heard
they can actually
in
see,
the air tonight,
and their face lights up and they're like, oh my God, there it is. Wow. This is great. Thanks, glasses. And that is kind of what we provide, because there's just isn't this view. You don't get it. You're not getting it in Spotify for Artists. You're not even getting it in your distributor backend that, is your only distributor. You only use TuneCore. You only use Secretly. You still aren't seeing your expenses. You're not seeing your advances. You're not seeing your splits. Like even when there's your splits in DistroKid and TuneCore, I know you can like split up stuff now, but it's pretty useless unless you pay out on the gross and it's just digital only and you just use TuneCore. Like the second you have a Bandcamp account or an expense, you're missing part of the picture. So it's been really fun to show people that, and you definitely get a lot of value emotionally, like you're saying, like seeing the ups and downs and seeing the effect, like, oh, cool, I spent money in January, and sure enough, in April, like I made more money than I ever have because I spent that, you invested it in an artist or in a campaign or whatever. And like, there it is. I can see it working in a way that goes way beyond just like, trying to figure out trending data analytics. Like, did my tweet lead to streams? It's like, maybe, but let's like actually look at dollars. That's what we're here to help you see.
Yeah.
But even more than that, I think the most positive thing about a system like ours versus spreadsheets, or, you know, just looking at it in Spotify for Artists, or like a distributor backend or something, is if you're keeping up with your data, if you're regularly adding your income and your expenses, you always know how much you owe everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a huge game changer, because when I was doing it in spreadsheets, for, you know, many great record labels, you hand them their digital stack of statements, and, you know, I would give them like a summary too, because of course who wouldn't want to see, you know, all the totals in one column, and then the total at the bottom, like, this is how much money you owe everybody. And sometimes it was quite a shock.
Yeah,
sometimes
that's true.
It's very like, oh my God, it's twice as much as I thought. I forgot that we, you know, got that big sync. And I forgot that other record recouped, and I'm in trouble because I just signed a new band and, you know, pressed a new record, and I don't have that cash, and oh boy, that's tricky.
Yeah.
That is lurking in the back of the minds of every single record label owner that I've ever met, and myself included.
It's so true.
Right up until the day that I started using Infinite Catalog. And now if you're adding your data regularly, you can see it in basically real time, as real as you want it to be. So it's not even about the 30,000 foot view so much as about the up-to-date view.
Yeah.
I'm not like, when you're doing the spreadsheets, you only know how much you owe everybody 2 times a year. You know, if you're doing it every 6 months, or 4 times a year if you're doing it every quarter. 4 days a year, you know what's going on with your business. Like that, it shouldn't be that way. You should always know what's going on.
Yeah, that's a great
point. You just need a tool to do it. And for whatever reason, nobody else wanted to build this tool. I'm not saying that. Everybody else, other people are building this, and they're doing great jobs. There's other cool stuff out there too. It's not just us. But it is a growing area for sure.
Let me present you with a unique problem that I want to see if your platform would be able to handle. So I subscribe to NHL Game Center, which is $200 a year, and I get to see all of the hockey games in a year. So it's like, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And
MLB TV for me.
Pardon me?
MLB TV.
Oh yeah,
for me.
Yeah.
Same,
exactly.
Same thing,
there you go. Exactly.
Baseball.
Yeah. So anyway, it cost me $200. Now, however, I share the password to NHL Game Center with one of the artists on my label. And so I charge him $100, but we take it out of his royalties. So he doesn't have to pay me cash. Would there be a way I could incorporate that?
But yeah, of course. It's no, it's just an expense. It's literally, either you would put it in as $100 transfer, a negative transfer, or otherwise known as an advance, where you're like, yeah, man, you know, essentially you owe me $100, but instead of, you know, me paying it to you and then you paying it back to me, I'm just going to subtract it from this total. Or you could make it an expense, a shared expense at the regular cost of $200, because it is being split between you and your artist evenly, and it would have the same effect on the bottom line.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's no reason why you can't do it that way. And again, that's why it's all about just understanding that this is just net profit share. It's like, we're talking about the music industry, and the music industry is where this is most needed and being used and needs to be understood better. But like, it's just sharing. It's just splitting. It's just, you know, Splitwise. Like, oh man, like, I mean, do you know the app Splitwise?
No.
Oh, it's a great app for splitting up ongoing expenses.
Oh, like sharing like a restaurant bill with your friends, that kind of thing?
Yeah, but it's better. That's, you know, you can do that on like Venmo or something, but it's better for like ongoing expenses. So like, you know, like a roommate, like I bought the groceries this time and it was $50, and you brought the groceries next time and it was $40, and just keeping that running tally going.
Yeah.
What we're doing isn't that different. It's really not.
Well, it's funny you say that, because as I think about this software, I think about like the time when I lived with roommates, and I would borrow milk for a bowl of cereal, and we would somehow try to balance that out with a long distance call that he made, and because I paid the phone bill and he does some. It was like it was brutal, but it's how we did it.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and yeah, I am also kind of obsessed with these questions and problems, and that's why. That's why I do what I do, I guess.
Listen, thanks for doing this. This has been a blast, and it's been a long one, but there are just so many really important questions to ask on this topic. And I think going back to something we said at the very beginning that I hadn't thought of until you mentioned it, and just the idea that there's a lot of labels, especially new labels, but even people like me who've been around for 11 years who are afraid to ask some of these questions. I'm afraid to ask some of these questions because it's something I should have known the answer to 10 and a half years ago, So I think that's why an episode like this and the video we do next is going to be really helpful and is important because a lot of this has just been hidden or people are too afraid to bring it up.
Yeah, and I hear that so hard. Like, there's still stuff that I learn every day that I'm like, wow, I can't believe I didn't know that before, or I hadn't seen this problem before. It happens to me all the time, and we're very big. That's why we're so big on like no judgments. Whatever you've done in the past, like we'll help you figure it out, or we'll help you, move forward in a positive way. Like, nobody comes to us trying to do something shady. It really just doesn't happen. If they're doing something shady, they're staying as far away from us as they can. So we're very if someone's asking us, like, we are very no judgment and very like, you're doing a good thing just by talking to us, even if you don't sign up, even if you don't become a customer. Happy to talk to anybody about this, and we want there to be more of a conversation around it. I mean, we were talking earlier about the lack of, resources on the internet and stuff. And like, just to share a quick little story, but like, I remember a few years ago, I Googled, like, how do you do royalty accounting? Like, what, not because I didn't know, but like, what do other people find when they Google this? And one of the top articles was, I forget what band it was, but it was a band just like breaking down their bullshit major label royalty accounting deal and really going deep on it. And I scrolled down to the comments, and this was like the third hit on Google at the time. And I scrolled down to the comments and I was like, this all sounds familiar. And then I looked and there was a comment from me from like 6 years earlier being like, net profit share is so much better than this. This is why do majors even do this? And it was like me 6 years earlier, and this was like the third hit on Google because no one talks about it. And we need to have more of a conversation. There needs to be more chatter about it, like either in public or talking to professionals who are interested in the problem. And we want more people to start record labels and put out records and work with bands and help bands. Like, it's a noble way to spend your day, in my personal opinion. And you just need the tools to do it, and we're just happy to help people. That's all.
Thanks for doing this, man. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you all for listening. Go to otherrecordlabels.com/royalties. Like I said at the beginning, Infinite Catalog has agreed to give our listeners 20% off your first 3 months. This is a really cool software. We're going to send out an email in a couple of days with a video walkthrough so you can see how it works. I know it's a podcast, so it's hard to get a visual, but Hunter took me through everything. It's really, really cool. I mean, to me, it just really solves a problem. It's kind of, in my mind, I've been doing spreadsheets for so long, and I've been doing them so poorly. You can just ask my artists who hate me. And I think this really cracks a code, in my mind at least, and it just really simplifies things. I love the platform. It looks so much like, the online platforms that we're used to, like, I don't know, MailChimp or Squarespace or Dropbox or something like that. And so go to otherrecordlabels.com/royalties to check out more. Thanks for listening.